Hey, how's it going, everyone? Thanks for being here today. Let me make sure that my mic's working. It looks like it is. I always forget to check. For some reason, my new computer, the microphone blows out when I shut my computer off and turn it back on. So let me fix this real quick for you, because I probably can't talk this quiet the whole way through this video. There we go. There we are. Sorry about that. All right, now let me up that a little. Okay, there we go. So I wanted to do a video talking about the debate community and the pros and cons of it. My reasoning for this, thank you all for being here, by the way, but my reasoning for this is one of the things that I had apprehension doing when I started doing political videos was using my Facebook channel, because a lot of my friends on Facebook were people that I met through the debate community, and sometimes you barely knew people, but you debated them, and you would share evidence or something like that through the debate, through Facebook and things like that. Believe it or not, I still remember, I'm old enough to remember when you had to be a member of a university to have a Facebook page. So I used to use it back in the day. I got rid of it for years. But once I started this channel, I was like, well, I should try to reach out as many people as I can. And so I started putting videos on Facebook. And I know there's a lot of people, because you have to understand the debate community is radical left. They're far left of even academia. So I knew there'd be a lot of people that didn't like it. And I did have friends in the debate community. So I don't want to inundate people that don't want to see my content with it. But I did put it on Facebook, and I ultimately decided if they don't like it, they could just unfollow me or something like that. No hard feelings. I wouldn't care. But I recently put a video up, which you can check on my channel. One of the things that I find most repugnant that we see that's been mainstreamed is this idea of white privilege and how you could use it as a cudgel to assert that white people have some kind of immorality or they have some kind of ill-gotten gains. This is a falsehood. The truth is, if you really want to get technical, that there is white privilege. There's also male privilege. There's also female privilege. There's also black privilege. There's also Hispanic privilege, Asian American privilege, etc., etc. There are privileges and detriments to all of those collective groups in certain situations or another. But the only one we seem to focus on is white privilege, because this is a dog whistle to be racist towards white people. This is exactly what we see happening across academia. It's exactly what we see happening now in mainstream America in our country. You see it happening in the media. It's how we say that the number one qualification for someone for vice president is their skin color and their gender, as opposed to whether or not they're actually qualified to do the job. In fact, someone, David Axelrod, I believe, just wrote an op-ed in CNN saying that actually Kamala Harris was not Joe Biden's first choice. His first choice was Gretchen Whitmer, but she's white. So he had to go with the black person. That's racism. When you say that the qualifications for this job are first and foremost based on your gender or your skin color, that's bigotry and racism. That's what it is. How did it come to this? Well, because we've bought into this critical race theory narrative that's been pervasive in academia, and even our young kids are being taught this in schools for years and years. And it's an orthodoxy that you can't challenge, or else you're racist, right? Just read the white fragility book. Here's a bunch of evidence of white fragility. If you disagree with that, that proves white fragility. That's the system that they set up. So this idea of white privilege, while it's okay and worthwhile to talk about, is there white privilege, it only makes sense in context of a conversation of what are actually underprivileges of being white, what are privileges of other races. And then what you quickly start to realize is the more we look at people through collective group identity, particularly based on immutable characteristics that they can't control, the worse things get and the more racism goes through the roof. Things like that. We'll talk more about the concept of white privilege here in a minute. Anyways, Oprah recently had, this is what my video was about. I didn't say it was the first video I ever did. I didn't say a word in. Oprah actually had a, kind of like a group session where she lectured people about white privilege, and you can check my video out. But basically what she says is this: it doesn't matter if you're poor, there's white privilege, and it doesn't matter if you, it's not saying you can't be a white person who's poor or going through a difficult time, but you'll always have that privilege of whiteness. That's what Oprah said. And then I played back to that with a video of Hinton, a 5-year-old white boy who was executed point blank by a black man. It looks like the motivation is because he was riding his bicycle in that black man's yard. He was executed in front of his two sisters, a 5-year-old white boy. And I asked, where was his privilege? Could Oprah explain where the privilege for that boy was? One of the things, as I am going to do a lot of criticism of the debate community and things that outrage me about them, I will let you know that I will not return the favor that many of them would give to me, which is personally insult me by name or make personal attacks on them. Instead, I will be insulting the community. So I will not be saying the names of the person that responded to me. Suffice it to say, it's a prominent member of the debate community who said that having privilege doesn't mean nothing bad could happen to you. Okay, fine. We could have that conversation. Great. Something bad. Bad things happen to you sometimes. You stub your toe, you're 5 and you get executed. Bad things. But you still have your privilege, right? Canon Hinton still had his privilege. He had his privilege. That's the important thing to remember about all this. He was privileged, so, right? But then he says that he's ashamed that I came from the debate community and that he's glad that my videos only have single-digit views. Now, I think it's funny. You see this a lot from the tolerant left, the left that claims that, there was they used to claim when I knew them issues of gatekeeping and of corporations that controlled narratives and things like that. Now, all of a sudden, they're quick to say, oh, I'm glad your value is based purely on how many people watch you. So it doesn't matter if my argument's true or not. I wonder if they would have said the same about historical black scholars that couldn't get platformed. And therefore, even though they were saying some of the most intelligent things in the country, they never had a platform for people to hear them. Do you think that the people in the debate community would have also said, oh, you're not getting many views or many people reading your books or articles, so you think that would have happened? Nah, I think not. But that's okay. Hypocrisy is what the extreme left does, so I totally get it. So it was an ad hom attack. You would think someone who's a prominent debate coach would understand that once you start making ad hom attacks that you've basically lost the argument. And again, it's different than criticizing an ideology, a philosophy, a political party, a group. What he's doing is criticizing me as an individual and making a snarky comment about the fact that I have so few views. It proves that I somehow don't have worth, or that he's somehow excited about that and that he's ashamed of me. So, yeah, no problem. You're right. We need to talk about Cannon. It's very important. There are no protests for him. That's part of his white privilege. That's part of it. Not only is he executed, but then no one cares. Or at least the people with institutional power don't care. Another thing the left used to say, remember, they're changing the definition of racism to say racism isn't just bigotry based on race. Racism is bigotry plus power. Well, all of our cultural institutions decide that they're going to cover certain people that die when it fits their racial narrative that they use. They don't really care about people of those races. They just use it to get power for themselves. And then they'll ignore when people not of that particular narrative are murdered. They don't care. They don't care at all about it. So that's part of Cannon's white privilege. Oprah, I'm sure, do I look sweaty? Well, maybe I am sweaty. Move Mike just a tad closer. I'll turn it up a little. You guys on Twitch are the best. Probably debate team people in the debate community. So anyways, that's the impetus for this video. So I thought instead of responding in kind, I'm not going to use that person's name or the people that liked his comment also from the debate community. I can also tell you that I've heard in private that people from the debate community that I consider close friends of mine have been discussing with things behind the scenes about how terrible of a person I am and things like that. And if you're listening to this, it's probably not you. If you're a really good friend of mine, it's not you. I'm talking about other people. But I'm not going to resort to that level and cite specific names or things like that. Instead, I'll talk about the debate community in general. So just to give you a little background, I debated from 2003. I started in the second semester of the 2002-2003 school year. So the spring semester, which is the second half of the debate season, I started. And I debated until 2007, 2008, and then was a judge in the community for some years after that, and a coach. Let me explain a little about what the debate community is for those of you who don't understand. It's a competition. It's a game. It was a game that I thoroughly enjoyed. And the idea is it's policy debate is what I did. You have teams of 2. You have one resolution that's all year. So a real simple resolution would say something like this. Resolve, the U.S. federal government should end corn subsidies. Half the time you're affirmative and you have to defend that resolution through a plan. And half the time you're negative and you have to negate the plan that was offered. And that's basically the game in a nutshell. Each team has 2 people. Each get to speak twice. You have time limits and things like that. What appealed to me was I like talking. I like arguing. I think disagreeing with people is something that's good. I encourage free speech and disagreement, even on my channel. That's something that I really like. And I honestly have a ton of friends. I ended up being friends better, I think, with people that disagreed with me because I thought they were more interesting people in general than someone just saying, yeah, I agree with you. Now, I also have tons of friends that I agree with, but I was drawn to the community because I thought here is a place where it doesn't matter that I'm some redneck from a know-nothing town that's incredibly poor. None of that matters. All that matters is what is your argument. Doesn't matter how you look. Doesn't matter where you're from. What is your argument? Your argument against the other team's argument. And you could argue whatever you want. If you wanted to argue to bomb China, something that I would deplore, I'm against these foreign regime change wars. It's okay. It's only a game. And that's the beauty of debate in general, not just the game, and the beauty of free speech. The reason we know things are good ideas or bad ideas is because we discuss them. And then the ideas that are bad, like racism, they were discussed, they were obviously bad, and therefore we discarded them. I wouldn't have a problem. You hear this argument in debate all the time. Oh, we have to limit some arguments because it would justify racist arguments. I don't care. Allow the racist arguments. I'm fine with that. Not because I'm a racist, because the opposite. Because when you make the racist argument, you'll lose. And then you'll realize, oh yeah, racism's dumb, right? It's only when you censor and when you say these arguments can't be talked about, then a bunch of people that aren't critical thinkers say, oh, there must be something true about that argument. That's why racism is so pervasive. You don't want to ban or tell these people, oh, you can't, Now, if you're advocating violence and things like that, it's one thing. And there's clearly a way to go over the line. But the way you deal with people like that is you just leave them talk and say, you see how dumb they are? That's the way you deal with it. So, I thought that was appealing. An activity where you could say that you could make any argument and it was all in the abstract and the best argument wins. And there was some of that in the debate community. But that's not really what the community was. Who you are, your skin color, what school you went to, your wealth, your gender, your sexual preference, your religious preferences. All of that was very important in debate. Very much so. And, everyone's human. Your judges are human, so it makes sense. I understand why. I had to learn harsh lessons, which are actually valuable life lessons, such as I used to wear like metal t-shirts and I had a scraggly beard down to here. My coach told me, dude, if you'd trim up and actually wear a suit and tie, you would do better. I did. So that's a good lesson to learn. And I don't begrudge necessarily that sort of thing going on. But it was a shame that, it was a kind of a bummer because to me it was like, well, this stuff's not supposed to matter. But it's life. And I'm not really here to complain about that marker of it specifically. So that's what the debate community was in general. I was remotely successful in the debate community. I didn't debate. So there's 3 divisions. There's novice, JV, and open. Once you do so well in one division or you've debated so long, you get bumped up to the next division. In the open division, which is like the varsity division, it's pretty rare to have people that are successful there that didn't have high school debate experience. Oh, and another thing to remember is there's no divisions based on school. So Clarion University, where I went, we debated Harvard, we debated the Naval Academy, we debated Cornell, whatever. There's no divisions like there is in college sports, where, if you're Division I, you don't compete against Division II. So I was proud to say that I did good. I was never like top tier. But I qualified for the national debate tournament, which is pretty rare for someone who didn't have high school experience. And I was proud of that. It was something I worked really hard for. And for the national debate tournament takes the top 72 teams in the country, but each school is allowed to have up to 3 teams. So actually, it's actually less schools than you see in the college basketball tournament. It's very prestigious, and I was proud to make it. Did not do so well once I was at that tournament, but I was proud to make it. So debate helped it. Some of the good things about it, it taught me critical thinking skills. I made friendships from there. I learned that there were things I needed to change in my life. So, for example, one of the criticisms that I'm about to talk about is sort of the contempt that's looked at to people that are of political ideologies that don't mash up, particularly people that come from rural or blue-collar families that are deemed low-educated and terrible people basically throughout the debate community, through a lot of people there. But I learned that I harbored animosity through people that lived in the city. And that if I was going to criticize people for looking where I came from with disdain, who was I to look at where they came from with disdain? So it really taught me to check some of my biases as well, which I fail at every day. Don't get me wrong, but it helped me understand that. It helped me also learn some researching skills, which I wasn't the best at, but I was okay. Researching skills, it helped teach me the lesson of hard work. One of the greatest lessons I ever learned was through debate, where my second to last year, me and my partner practiced really hard. And you think because you're young and you watch all these movies, you watch like Rocky, you train real hard, then you win the fight. Well, that's Rocky 2 through 5. Sometimes Rocky 1 happens. You train real hard and you lose. And that happened to me my third year. I trained real hard and I thought I was going to qualify for the national debate tournament, and I did not. And that was a great lesson to me that life's not a fairy tale. Life's real. And sometimes you work hard and you still don't win, and that's okay. So you could either work harder, you can make excuses. I worked harder and we made it. So there were good things about the debate community. Some of my best friends in the world I met through that community. So that's the good things I have to say about the community. Now, the reason that I'm doing this video, I think that the community's toxic. I think that other than the personal relationships I made through it, which I wouldn't change for the world, some of the people I met in the debate community are, they're family to me at this point. And it would shock you to know many of them absolutely despise my political beliefs. And that's okay. I don't care for theirs. but we get along. I think other than that, the community is better off gone. That it's more detrimental to the people that participate in it and to the country as a whole and academia as a whole. In fact, I think it's one of the most toxic environments that you'll ever see. The extremism that you're seeing today, debate's been 10 years in front of. The extremism you see in campuses in 2010, 2011 was already occurring in the debate communities in 2003. And I told people about this and they just laughed. That would never make it to mainstream America. Then we saw what happened at Evergreen University. And now we see what's happening at the New York Times and on cities all across the country. This all came because the extreme left understood that winning elections is less important than winning the culture war. Shaping the minds of young people is more important than who wins a local election or a federal election or a state election. And these schools have become indoctrination chambers and bigoted ideologies that refuse and are intolerant of anyone who disagrees with them. And the debate community is the premier example of that. Now, I'm sure if you're watching and you're from the debate community, you probably disagree with me. And maybe I'm wrong, and I'd be willing to have a discussion with any of you about it. But deep down, you know it's true. You know that in the debate community, if you're a moderate, that's considered extreme right. I could name people that identified as Republicans or Trump supporters on one hand of the people I knew in the debate community, out of hundreds upon hundreds of people. It was an echo chamber that sought to punish and demean and demoralize anyone who disagreed with them. More than that. And the harshest criticism I could levy at the debate community. Many of the people in positions of power in the debate community, high-powered coaches, administrators, and things like that, are the most arrogant, morally self-righteous, smug people you will ever meet. Yet at the same time, they are some of the most immoral, disgusting people that you could imagine. It's exactly what we see with Hollywood. It's exactly what we see with the media. People that will lecture you, oh, you're a construction worker. Construction workers whistle at women, therefore they're horrible. Meanwhile, in Hollywood, I'm Meryl Streep, and I defend Roman Polanski, who sodomized a 13-year-old girl. That's the type of things you see in the debate community. They make proclamations on the people they think are less educated and less intelligent as them, and they claim to be their moral superiors, when in reality, some of the disgusting things that occurred within that community, and I'm talking real disgusting, as I'll get into later, are looked at or turned away or accepted without batting an eye. They're a community that's so insular when outsiders look into the community even for half a second and realize how perverse and how ridiculous it is. Their response, instead of saying, geez, maybe these outsiders have a point, is to double down on the extremism, double down on the insanity, and say, well, we'll just make sure that no one on the outside sees what we're actually doing. Did you hear the story the other day of teachers' unions that are saying there's certain things in our curriculum now that we'll be teaching online that we can't do because we're afraid that parents will see? Anytime that public authority figures are afraid of transparency, you should really scratch your head of what's going on. This is true of the debate community as well. There was an incident at one point where some of the most woke members of the debate community were accusing each other of being racist or bigots or terrible people, which resulted in one of the more prominent members of the debate community mooning the other side. That happened to be filmed and then was placed on CNN, which led to the removal of some of these actual debate programs. And so after that, there was a question on whether or not we should be recording debates because heaven forbid that outsiders see what's actually going on in these rooms. If you're someone who debated in the 60s or 70s and you're donating money to your former debate program because you remember how important debate was to you in the 70s when you were in school, you might not want to give that money if you find out that they think you're an evil, terrible person based on your skin color or your political ideology. So what better to do than just say, let's not leave the outsiders see what we're doing. And thus the community's been dying. Less and less teams participate. It's becoming more and more insular. It's just a smugness where they think that they're declining participation. They think that's a badge of honor. Oh, well, everyone who doesn't agree with what we do or everyone who has a problem with kind of how we handle our community, they're clearly inferior to us. So we'll just keep plugging away until there's 2 or 3 teams left. That's what they'll do. Here's a group, and I mean this sincerely, of some of the smartest people you'll ever meet. Very intelligent people, highly educated people, which that doesn't necessarily go hand in hand. They actually could be a laboratory for ideas discussing things that would make the country better and things like that. Instead, they've decided to become insular. They've decided to adopt extremist policies, most of which hate people based on their political ideology, their sex, their skin color, and most of which is very critical of the United States and seeks to return it to some sort of Marxist postmodernist revolution or something like that. And that's the dominant orthodoxy in the debate community. And you might say, well, that's fine. You could debate about it. Not really, because many of these positions, you're not even allowed to take the opposite side of it, or you would be drummed out of the community, or you'd just never win. So let me talk to you about a situation that you would see in the debate community. I would say somewhere between a dozen to 20 times in my career as a debater, the following situation happened to me. Well, first off, let's start with something simple. This is something that doesn't have to do with radical leftism as much as it has to do with just what happens when you have people that are so insular that no one ever tells them, like, wait a minute, what you're doing is insane. In the debate community, you talk like an auctioneer, and it's actually one of the things that's harmed me in the real world. I'm constantly told, you're talking too fast, slow down. Well, you're trained because you only have a certain amount of time that you should talk as fast as you can. So picture that everyone talked like this at one point and said, hey, I think you should value my argument over them, maybe with more inflection than that, but about at this speed. And then they started talking like this. They got a little faster and said, okay, well, I only have a limited amount of time. And then they started talking like this because they said, okay, I only have a limited amount of time, so I'm going to try to talk a little faster. And then they started talking like this because they said there's only a limited amount of time and they need to talk faster. Then they started talking like this because they said there's only a limited amount of time and you need to talk faster. And so this is a debate round. You would walk into a round. The first team speaks. This is what they would say. Observation 1. Let's just say something. Dr. Fauci says we have no reason we can't have in-person voting. This is from 8/13/2020. It's been an interesting afternoon for commentary. U.S. coronavirus novel Pfizer Van Archman said that during the vaccine, the drug should be treated with the virus. It's still possible. It might not go away. The actual seasonal viruses like the flu. We just don't know. But the biggest headline that came out of Dr. Fauci unequivocally back to President Trump's demand for in-person voting, and there's no reason we can't have in-person voting. We're also whining about a pessimistic outlook for the virus. We're grumbling about the irresponsibility young people totally attacked President Trump's handling of the virus. That's debate. And I'm slow. You're like, oh, man, no one could talk like that. Not only could I not understand half the time people were talking because I just wasn't good at following speed like that, but that actually is very slow. There are people that could speak tremendously faster than that. Now, as an outsider, you would go in and go, what does this have to do with intelligent people talking about ideas? This is nonsense. This is something that 99% of the population can't get any value out of because they can't understand what you're saying. That was debate. No one was there to tell them as it got progressively worse year after year. Dude, this is nonsense. Like, and it's hard. It's hard to put a threshold on, hey, you can't talk faster than this. How do you tell someone that? But there's clear that it's unreasonable to talk that fast and it gives no value. Now, there are value that's given. You could argue there's value. It teaches critical thinking. It allows more arguments to be involved in the round. But one of the things that the cost of that is that it's so insular that an average person can't participate. I would think that you would want a community that was inclusive of all people. Isn't it ironic that some of the very people that talk about the need for diversity and for bringing new people into an activity embrace policies that keep them out as much as possible? Now, to the radical left in the debate community, to their credit, a lot of them understood kind of the insanity of talking fast like that, and they decided to reject that, which is good. I think that's something I agreed with them on. So by no means am I saying that it was just the radical left. It was the moderate left, which is the majority, there wasn't any right-wingers, hardly. So it was basically the moderates and the less extreme people that were saying, no, the speed's good. But I only bring it up because it's just an example. Another example is everything ends in nuclear war. So let's say me and you, WZ, wanted to have a discussion, and you said, hey, I think that we should stop spending so much money on the construction that's happening here in Clarion University. And I would say, one, the economy is doing good right now. 2, if you don't build these roads up, it will collapse the economy. 3, or it'll collapse the local economy. 3, the local economies around the country are important to the global economy. 4, to the world economy, the national economy. And 4, if the national economy collapses, that's nuclear war. And you'd be like, I just said we shouldn't spend $1 million on that highway out there. What are you talking about, nuclear war? And so it was stupid. Everything got to that because the bigger the threshold, the bigger the impact. So that sort of stuff was stupid. And a lot of people on the extreme left railed against that, which is reasonable. However, the radical left was even more toxic. There were several types of ways that you could debate, several strategies. What I'm talking and explaining to you is policy strategies. Who are some good conservative debaters currently? Jordan Peterson, I don't know if he would consider himself conservative, was all right. Ben Shapiro was good. You had, Steven Crowder's okay. I don't agree with everything they say, but understand what I'm talking about. Debate in the colloquial term, how you understand it, is different than the activity of policy debate. I don't know anyone involved in policy debate anymore other than coaches. I don't know any debaters, so I couldn't tell you if there are conservative debaters that are good. Traditionally, you would think that schools like Liberty University, that was ran by Jerry Falwell, that was a Christian evangelical university, you would assume that that would be a conservative team. But by the time I left, that wasn't the case at all. They were running critical race theory just like everyone else. Now, that's not to say they couldn't have had conservative members on their team, but the ideas that you were allowed to espouse were certainly not of conservative values. So, but continuing here, you would end up seeing the kind of intolerance that came in the form of, so I was talking, that's a policy argument. You say my plan is X, I say here are the policy implications of your plan. Even if it's ridiculous implications, that's a policy argument. You also had what was called critiques. Critiques are kind of postmodernist objections to something that's inherent in your plan. So, for example, a common critique would be something such as this. You say, yes, we think the U.S. federal government should lower corn subsidies. I would say, you have embraced the U.S. federal government. The U.S. federal government is racist, therefore you lose. And you would say, well, what are you going to replace? Do you replace the U.S. federal government? Is that your plan? No. Well, what's your plan? Or they'd say, your plan endorses capitalism. Capitalism's evil, therefore you lose. And you would say, oh, so you're advocating socialism or Marxism? No. Well, what are you advocating? Nothing. We just say that your plan is philosophically bigoted or racist or evil. Now, it's more complicated than that, and I'm not going to claim to be the predominant or premier understanding of postmodernist critiques, but oftentimes this style of debate was frustrating because what it allowed you to do was you could debate the same thing every year ad nauseum, and you never had to change your position because the resolution's always going to say that you have to say the U.S. federal government does some sort of action. So they would just say the government's racist or the government needs to give the land back to Indians, and that would be the debate. There's frustrating ways to get out of it because it's something that you see. I don't have a problem with critiques of capitalism. I don't have problems with critiques of the government and things like that. But your way of getting offense against their position is normally when someone says, I have a problem with your position, you say, well, then what's your position? And when they say, oh, no, I don't take a position. I just have a problem with your position. Well, that's not how the real world works, and I don't see a lot of the utility in that. We see this all the time. People will criticize the current system, but they don't look at it comparatively to other systems. And so when you say we need a revolution to dismantle the systems of this country, okay, and replace it with what? Man, we don't have a suggestion. Well, that's not good, right? So that was another style of debate. And then the third debate, which is really the bane of debate, is performance. And what a performance debate is it's hard to define. I would say that performance debate is more about you as an individual than ideas in the abstract. Even the critique is talking about the abstract. Should the U.S. federal government exist? Should capitalism exist? Should you embrace those sort of things, etc.? So to some degree, that's still talking about hypothetically, once you get into performance, it tends to lean towards more of this is who I am as a person. This is who you are as a person. And that's very dangerous and terrible because what it does is it allows actual personal attacks on people. So here, I guess better than try to define performance debate, I'll just give you examples. An example of performance debates I've seen, playing the national anthem, Jimi Hendrix national anthem while burning the American flag and not saying a word. Two men simulating gay sex for 9 minutes, moaning, not saying a word. Rapping about the need to give Native Americans the land back. Stripping completely nude to throw off the vestiges of the patriarchy. I've either seen or been at tournaments where these sorts of things occurred. Now, the very basis of debate is that it's a game. Now, the people in the debate community like to say this game is the most important. It's important to life. It's more than a game. But it is a game. And the only way the game could have value for you educationally or entertainment-wise or anything is if there are rules of the game that are followed. And the performance debaters in the extreme left not only reject the rules, but they actually encourage rejecting the rules. In fact, I had heard dozens of times that if the resolution said you have to have the U.S. government eliminate corn subsidies, and you stand up and said, I'm going to simulate gay sex with my partner, and I said, okay, interesting, but this has nothing to do with the topic, and so you should lose. That's called topicality. The rules say you have to defend the topic, right? And if you don't, then you lose, even if your argument's true. So, for example, this prevents something such as this. If the topic is the U.S. federal government should eliminate corn subsidies, and you stand up and you say 2 + 2 is 4, and we're going to approve that to you for 9 minutes, it's going to be real hard as a negative to argue, no, 2 + 2 isn't 4. You're like, yeah, okay, that's true, but that has nothing to do with what we're supposed to be talking about, so you shouldn't win. It's not a reason to affirm the resolution, which is your job when you're affirmative. Or if I affirm the resolution and say, hey, we should get rid of corn subsidies, and you stand up and say 2 + 2 is 4, okay, that could be a true argument, but that doesn't disprove my argument, right? You see how that goes? But they said that no, if I asked them to follow the rules and be topical, that was me being a slave master, tying them to a post and whipping them. It was racist. It's part of sort of an established Eurocentric history of academia that says, no, you have to think this way and you have to discuss these things. And people of color don't share those rules, and so they shouldn't have to abide by those rules. I heard some form of that argument dozens of times. And so, which I find absolutely repugnant in the first place. How are you likening someone to asking, imagine playing a game of checkers and you decide, I'm going to move on, the red square. And you're like, you can't do that. You have to stay on the black squares and checkers. And you're like, oh, this is how my ancestors must have felt when the slaves were whipping them. How offensive and demeaning is that? But that's what happened. That was the type of stuff that went on in the debate community. And it was nonsense. It was utter nonsense. And everybody knows that was in the debate community that this happened. Everybody knows it. Everyone. They know. They'll deny it, they'll obfuscate, or they'll say it was okay or it wasn't as bad as it sounded. It was. This happened routinely. In fact, at the national debate tournament, I lost my last round ever saying rules matter. You have to defend, and I lost. And I was like, okay, well, whatever. Now, I'm not complaining that I lost. That's not what's going on. The big reason I lost, because don't get me wrong, I adapted to the way the game was being played, to my shame, as I'll get to in a bit here. So it's still my fault I lost, don't get me wrong, with some notable exceptions. But 99% of the rounds I ever lost was because of me, or me and my team didn't do as well. So, but what I'm saying is that it's kind of stupid. How could you have a game when the very rules of the game are decided to be actively encouraged to be broken? Now, they selectively enforce the rules. For example, there's rules on how long you could talk. There's rules on who's eligible to debate, right? And things like that. Those are all enforced. No, everyone enforces those without question. But the rules of what you should be talking about, they don't care. You can skirt those as much as you want. And by the way, in certain cases, you can even skirt those other rules, but only selectively. So you could talk over someone during their speech, even though that's against the rules. As long as you check certain ideological boxes that mean that it's okay, and you're allowed to be indignified that someone said something, it's okay for you to speak over them then. Not all the time. Even most of the left-wing judges think that's inappropriate. But you see what I'm talking about. And so you end up with this absurd game where people are talking as fast as possible, and they're doing all sorts of things that have nothing to do with the topic, and arguing that if you try to make them have to do something with the topic, that you're a racist. That's the sort of stuff that was going on. Now, all of this stuff is why the game's dumb, right? But why is the game dangerous? And that's what I want to get to. The game is dangerous because it has embraced totally the idea of critical race theory. I would walk into round after round and say, I'd be the first speaker and be like, okay, we're going to reduce corn subsidies. This would be after each. So the way policy debate goes is the first person on the affirmative team speaks first for 9 minutes. Then you have 3 minutes of cross-examination where the other team could ask you questions and you could respond. Then their first person goes for 9 minutes. Then you cross-ex. Then your person goes for 9 minutes. You're a teammate. Then you cross-ex. Then the other person's teammate goes for 9 minutes. Then you cross-ex. Then it flips. Then it's the negative now. They go back to back. They go for 9 minutes, the second negative speaker. Then the first negative speaker goes for 6 minutes. Then the first affirmative 6, second negative 6, and finally the second affirmative 6. And that's the end of the debate. So you each get 2 constructive speeches and 2 rebuttal speeches with 3 minutes of cross-ex in between each of the constructive speeches. So a debate round could happen like this. Probably about once every other tournament I would have this round. You'd stand up and you'd talk about subsidies or something, and the first cross-ex question to you would be, why haven't you acknowledged your privilege? And you'd say, yeah, I guess I'm a privileged person. as a white person, you're privileged, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, yeah. And then that team would stand up and they would say, whiteness is a privilege. Whiteness is evil. We must reject whiteness. Now, if you want to win in the debate community, you have one choice. One choice only. There is one argument you could make to respond to the idea that whiteness is evil. And that is to say, I reject my whiteness. I am not white. That's it. That's your only choice. 99% of judges, if you would stand up and say, yeah, I think whiteness is okay, I don't have a problem with it, I'm not going to denounce my family heritage or my ethnic heritage or something like that, you would be drummed out of the community. If you would lose. I mean, if you had the nerve to suggest that blackness was bad, you literally would be kicked out of the community. It was also common to be told, you're a man, you would need to reject your privilege of a man, and for you to reject masculinity. You could not defend masculinity. You would lose. You could do it. You would just lose. You absolutely would lose. Absolutely. The first time this argument gets more nuanced the higher levels you get in debate. The first time I heard this argument was probably my first year and I was a novice. And understand that the way the debate team would work was you have a team of 2, but your school might have 10, 12, 14 teams. Clarion usually had about 6 teams. And so your top level debaters would be writing arguments that often the lower level debaters would be trying to make those same arguments. But oftentimes they couldn't do it as nuanced. And so I was told flat out the first time I heard this argument, you're white, you shouldn't exist. I've heard that argument made many times. Now, again, I don't mind the argument in the abstract. If you want to make the hypothetical argument that white people shouldn't exist, that's fine. You should lose. You won't lose. You'll win in the debate community. That's deemed a very coherent and reasonable argument, right? But you should be able to make that argument in the abstract. What I dislike is you're white, you shouldn't exist when you make it personal. And there's a difference to that, right? And you can tell how the debate ends up playing out. And so this happened if you're a man, all men need to die, all white people need to die, white people are evil, white people do this and that, men do this and that. This is common. This is a common strategy. There are schools that literally their entire program, that's the only argument they ever make. And it doesn't matter if they're affirmative or negative, none of it matters. It never matters. Because if you say, well, wait a minute, what's this have to do with the topic? They say you're a racist. And so you get into these rounds where I learned the higher levels I got into debate, you had to ask tricky questions. Okay, you say to reject whiteness. What is whiteness? Is whiteness the skin color I was born with? They can't say that because they understand that they need to couch their racism in terms that make it seem like they're not just saying you were born evil. So they have to say, no, you choose whiteness. And theoretically, you could be a person of color and choose whiteness, or you could be a person with the pigmentation white who chooses to reject their whiteness. Right? So the issue is, am I rejecting my whiteness? Okay, then I would say, what is whiteness? Can you define whiteness? Most of them never could. Most of them would put it in context of privilege, and when you got right down to it, it was money. And so then my next argument would be this, something that would go like this. You go to a prestigious university such as the University of Louisville or, the University of, Liberty, Mary Washington, universities in Chicago, Harvard, places like that, whatever. Could be any, pretty much the university I went to, Clarion University, was basically bottom rung as far as the amount of tuition costs, the kind of prestige of the university, both in the community and outside of it. Most state schools like Clarion University do not have debate squads. And if they do, the chances of them having a debate squad competing at the highest level is very rare. It's just the way it is. For all their talk of diversity, it's very much an elite's game. So I would be like, so you go to a prestigious university. I go to Clarion University. Did you get a scholarship? Oh, you did get a scholarship? Yeah, I'm working at Burger King to pay my way through debate. So I work at Burger King 30 hours a week. Plus then I'm in the debate, doing debate full time and going to school. How's your financial? Do you drive a car? Oh, you have a nice car? Yeah, I have a 1989 Ford Tempo that I bought off my friend for $80. It's falling apart. I don't have electricity in my home right now because I have a sister that's 20 years younger than me and my parents' furnace blew up. And so I decided to try to give them some money to help with that. And also I was kind of a drunk and spent a lot of my money on booze. But we literally got into a situation where me and my roommate didn't have electricity. Can you please tell me about my whiteness again? Why is it that I'm more white than you? And it didn't matter because then it would either deflect, they would either try to change the subject or they would deflect to, yeah, but being white is itself a privilege, just like Oprah said. So it didn't matter if by almost any objective measure, the school they attended, the amount of money they had, the scholarship opportunities they had, all of that. It didn't matter that by any objective measure, they had a better situation than me. I still had my whiteness. Now, in this particular game where we're talking about white privilege, you could imagine that that white privilege doesn't exist much in the most radical leftist game you could imagine. It doesn't exist at all. In fact, it's a detriment. Being white definitely would hurt your chances. If it came to questions of identity, it was almost always more advantageous to be a person of color than a white person. But still, we had to pretend that there was an advantage to being white. That's what was going on. What's up, Drone Tech? Thanks for being here. So this happened over and over. And I got better at knowing how to debate against this, but it was incredibly frustrating. And I'm kind of shamed that I got good at kind of debating this, because what it meant was rejecting and embracing an ideology that now we see being used as an excuse to be racist towards white people. And by the way, let me be real clear here. The idea of white privilege and the way it's used to say that based on the pigmentation and the color of your skin, that you have some kind of original sin because of things that your ancestors did. By the way, it doesn't matter if your ancestors actually fought in the North and wanted to end slavery, or if they came, you're an immigrant, that your family was immigrants that came after slavery or something like that. If you are deemed white, you still are part of that privilege, is part of their argument. So the specifics don't matter. It's generalities. You are judged by your skin color. There's a name for that. That's called racism. That's what this is. It's pure, unadulterated racism. And it's embraced at the highest levels of academia, and now being embraced at most of the institutions of power in this country. And this is where it started, in academia. And the debate community has been one of the earliest and biggest purveyors of it. Almost universally accepted. And there are people that disagree with it, but they're scared to death to speak out. So I'm ashamed that I actually went and capitulated and said, no, I reject my whiteness. I don't reject my whiteness. I don't identify with my whiteness. And for those of you that are watching, they're in the debate community that are like, oh, Rob's white identity means so much to him. I have literally lost subscribers because I make this argument all the time. If white people would decide to voluntarily stop procreating tomorrow, I wouldn't have a problem with it at all. When I'm dead, when I look back 100 years from now, I hope to see people that shared the values that I have. I don't care if they look like me. I don't care. If the entire country was black and they were all people that really valued the ideas of the United States and personal liberty and personal freedom, and the ideas that all men are created equal, and that we should, embrace sort of the individual, that'd be fine. I wouldn't care that they look like me or not. At all. I've lost subscribers because I say something like that. That's how little my whiteness means to me. I take value in my personal family and my personal family that came before me, but I couldn't tell you more than 2 generations back anything about my family. I don't care. It's never been important to me. My community, my family, people of all colors, people of all religions, people that are close to me of all political persuasions. That's the sort of stuff that matters to me. I have more in common with black people that live in my town of Clarion University than I do with white people that live in New York City. So why would I identify based on the racial group? I don't. Now, does that mean that I'm not a hypocrite at times, and sometimes I make arguments that seem to be that way? It could be. But oftentimes it's in my response to what I see as this identity politics being pushed that's so toxic by the people like I'm talking about. Right? So that's what my feelings on race. And so I'm ashamed that I took part in what would become what's the word I'm looking for? The playbook for how to be racist in this country. And also, let me be perfectly clear. The people that are pushing this white privilege nonsense, this must reject your whiteness stuff, they're also being racist to people of color as well. Because inherently what happens is they say they need special treatment. We need to treat them like children. Oh, nothing's their fault. They don't have personal responsibility, blah, 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 blah. And I've said many times on this show, and it's true of the debate community, like, I would rather someone dislike me than someone pity me. Pity is one of the most disgusting, despicable things that you could do, particularly to a group of people based on an immutable characteristic. And so I actually do. The one white privilege that I do acknowledge is that if I say something, I'm judged as an individual. But if you're one of my black friends and you say something, you're judged as a group characteristic. What do you mean you're voting Republican? You're black. Joe Biden told you, if you're not voting for him, you're not really black. You would never say that to a white person. And that's insidious and it's horrific. Yet that's the sort of racism. So when you start engaged in racist judging of people by your skin color, you're not just being racist to that person of that particular skin color. You're also then going to de facto be racist to the very people you're claiming to speak for. So that's what was going on. Over and over, you were told in this community, you have to reject your whiteness. You have to reject masculinity. That's the norm. And now it's the norm. You see the 1619 Project. These people are running the New York Times. I don't know that they were in policy debate, but this ideology, it's running the New York Times. It's infiltrated our media. It's infiltrated Silicon Valley. It's infiltrated our entertainment industry. It's infiltrated academia. That's where it started. It's infiltrated our politics. It's infiltrated corporate America. And that's how, when you're this person that criticized me on Facebook from the debate community, it's how you could look at a 5-year-old dying, being murdered at the hands of a black man, executed in front of his 2 sisters. And you could say, well, he still had privilege. Just because bad things happen to you doesn't mean you didn't have privilege. So just so you know, and I grant you that people in the debate community might speak differently, but the people that advocate this critical race theory stuff in the debate community, in politics, in the media, all of those places, just so you know, I believe that they probably share the mentality of that person that was criticizing me. Cannon Hinton had white privilege. He was executed, but he had white privilege. At least he had his whiteness, right, Oprah? At least he had that. That's what's going on. Now, there's something even more nefarious. So a bunch of collective people, they're intolerant. You couldn't defend whiteness. They're intolerant. The one thing about debate, and by the way, it used to be that the left were the champions of free speech. Now it's the total opposite. There's no diversity of ideas in the debate community. Very limited. They're some of the most intolerant people I've ever met to people that disagree with their political ideology. A lot of people accepted me because I was a fun character and I was harmless. So even though they despised my politics, I mean, I had people in the debate community when Donald Trump won, here were some of the comments I heard from people I really like. It was our job to stop someone like Trump from being elected. No, your job's to be a coach in a game. That's your job. But inherently, everyone in the debate community thought that we were supposed to stop Trump from being elected. Wait a minute, I thought this was a game. Oh, but trust them, they're all for diversity of opinions. They just all implicitly agreed that it was their job to stop someone like Trump from being elected. I was asked by people that had lived with me. I was asked by people that are good friends with me. Was I racist for voting for Donald Trump? They really couldn't accept that Hillary Clinton was so despicable. They couldn't accept that I didn't think that Donald Trump was a racist. When I asked what the racism was of Trump, they would cite things like, well, what about this housing case with him and his father, were fined because they were doing housing prejudice against people of color. That could be true. Maybe he changed. Maybe it wasn't to do with race. Maybe it had to do with finances. But okay, even if it is true, even if the story is as you're granting, so what? I could do the same thing. I could play the same game with the candidate you voted for. We know personally Hillary Clinton paid women on her staff less than she paid men. Does that mean that you're a sexist because you voted for Hillary Clinton? You would say no. I don't approve that Hillary Clinton did that, but, hey dog, stop hitting my camera. I don't approve that Hillary Clinton did that, but the other side's worse. Trump's worse. That's why I voted for Hillary. And I like some of Hillary's other ideas. Okay, why can't I be given the same courtesy? I must be racist if I voted for Donald Trump. Even if you think he's racist, why must that be the case? Maybe I'm against a bloodthirsty maniac that wanted a no-fly zone over Syria and to drag us into armed conflict with a nuclear-armed superpower. Maybe I'm against a bloodthirsty maniac that when she found out that Gaddafi, who was illegally and unethically overthrown by her and Obama, when he was sodomized with a bayonet and dragged through the streets, her response was, we came, we saw, he died. I would never think that, oh, you voted for the person that said that, so you're a bloodthirsty maniac that's for the forced sodomization of people with bayonets and the overthrow of countries. I would never say that. I would say, okay, you voted for someone because your reasons. I'm not going to judge you as an immoral person for that vote. But I was not given the same courtesy from people that I still respect to this day. It's a sliding scale. Not everyone's monolithic in the debate community, but the community as a whole is intolerant of ideas that go against their orthodoxy. They don't want transparency. In fact, it used to be that you would record debates because maybe you wanted to use them in the future to see where you went wrong, or you wanted to show other debaters, well, here's what this person did good or what they could change. I was asked after a while not to record debates because there was an incident that basically a really bad incident in the debate community that involved, involved someone mooning someone got released to CNN, which led to the destruction of debate departments. And so then people were like, well, we don't want the real world to see what we're doing. Imagine that when people, the average person, left wing, right wing, it doesn't matter. Imagine when 90% of people that aren't involved in your activity would look at it, regardless of their political ideology, with eyes like this going, wait, what? What is going on here? Why are they talking like auctioneers? What are they talking about? What's this debate supposed to be? It's supposed to be about gun control and they're simulating gay sex. What does this have to do with any? By the way, I don't get the fact that they're simulating gay sex. It doesn't matter to me. It would be equally stupid to be simulating heterosexual sex. The reason that it's relevant that it was gay sex was because it had to do with kind of bigotry or perceived bigotry against people in the LGBT community. That's why I bring that up. I never saw simulation of straight sex, but that was one round that I saw. So that's the sort of thing, right? That's the sort of stuff that the average person, and again, you could be a big Hillary supporter, a big Joe Biden supporter, and still be like, wait, what? Now, anyone that's like got any sort of self-reflection would go, geez, if almost everyone not involved in our activity sees it for 10 minutes and says, this is totally insane, maybe we're doing something wrong. But they don't. Instead, they say, well, then stop showing it to people outside the community. That's their response to this. No. They're wrong. They're not as educated as us. They're not as smart as us. We must be doing the right thing. And it's the same thing you see with people in Hollywood. Like, I remember listening to Joe Rogan's podcast once about Johnny Depp, and like seemingly Johnny Depp's kind of losing his mind a little. And he's going through a lot. And I don't say that I actually like Johnny Depp as an actor. He said some things politically that I disagree with. But at this point, if you're going to watch any entertainment, chances are the person you're watching hates your political ideology if you're not an extreme leftist. So just as an actor, I don't begrudge the man. It seemed interesting. He's in a lot of movies I like, whatever. But he's kind of losing it a little, it seems. And I saw whoever he was talking to, it might have been Doug Stanhope, who's a comedian. He was like, look, here's the deal. Here's what happens. Once you get to a level of fame that's so high that you literally can't go for a meal with your family without like having hysteria, like Beatles level fame or, Elvis or Michael Jackson, right? Like it drives you a little crazy. And so then the logical extension of this is think of this. Think that you're like George Clooney. And you grew up and everyone around you is like, Mr. Clooney, you're the greatest. You're the greatest. And you're like, yeah, here's my thoughts on politics. And they're like, yep. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Never any pushback. The entire Hollywood community is like that. There's never an outside opinion. It's all just them saying, oh, you're all the greatest. You're all the smartest. You're so much better than everyone else. You're just a more moral person and you know more than them. You're just so great. And that's how you get this insanity of people like Alyssa Milano, people that could unabashedly say, believe all women. Oh, but I don't believe the woman that accused Joe Biden. And they feel totally morally justified. They'll tell, I talk about the hypocrisy all the time. They tell you that open borders for you, they live in gated communities. They say your light bulbs are killing the environment. They have 3 homes and they fly in private jets. And on and on. No weapons for you, no cops for you, armed security for them. See how long that Black Lives Matter protest and riot lasted in Beverly Hills? Not very long. That's that community. But they get so crazy because no one ever tells them, hey, one of the advantages that we have as conservatives, this really is an advantage, is everyone in institutions of power, not everyone, but most of the institutions of power and the people that control them have challenged every time we have a belief. And that sharpens us because we're used to taking criticism. And most of us, I personally welcome it. Fine, disagree with me. I'll have the discussion with you. I debate people on the left all the time. I don't mind it. Some of which I consider my friends, even though I despise a lot of the positions they take. So this community's became so insular that it's just crazy. Now, despite that I was attacked for my skin color, I was attacked for my political beliefs, I was attacked by because who I voted for. I was attacked because of my gender, I was attacked because of my sexual preference. Despite all that, I have not one time, some of the people that do this themselves, not one time have I personally commented on someone's Facebook page or went out of my way to insult a specific individual and say that I'm glad that they're not having success in an endeavor of theirs, whether it be their YouTube channel, their Facebook page, whatever. Never once have I did that. Never once have I said that I was ashamed of a specific person, that I was associated them in some way. That's the courtesy these moral superiors give to me. That's what they do to me. But they're better than me. Trust them. They're better than me. So that leads me to the incident that I experienced, and this is what's... This will probably get me in trouble. I don't care. The debate community is a big Me Too movement type community. They believe in a lot of that stuff, right? Okay? More so than the average group. It's extreme left. They believe in that stuff, which, by the way, I don't begrudge the beginnings of the Me Too movement. And there's certainly women that have gone through horrific, and men, by the way, but, you know, let's be honest, mostly women, that have been victims of some of the most horrific sexual abuse. And a lot of times they were silenced, and it's something that we need to fight to change. But it's clear that the Me Too movement became political, and it was about the weaponization of sexual assault. And all you need to do is look at the treatment of conservatives versus liberals. Just look at Kavanaugh versus Keith Ellison. That says all you need to know. Look at Trump versus Joe Biden and what the Me Too movement and the people that promulgate it say about it. That's all you need to know. But one of the things that aggravates me in general in life is it oftentimes seems the people that are standing on their moral high horse telling you that they're more moral than you are some of the least moral people in existence. Now, I talk a lot about how I despise what the establishment left's become and the establishment Republican Party. I talk a lot about it. I talk a lot about how those leaders, I think, don't care about the country and don't care about the people, and they're terrible people. But you'll be hard-pressed, and maybe I'm sure it's happened, but you'll be hard-pressed to see me calling people immoral for their political beliefs. But we see this all the time on the other side. And you could look at somewhere like Hollywood, that they'll stand on their moral high horse with the Me Too movement, yet they all defended Harvey Weinstein and Roman Polanski. They knew what they were accused of, and they knew there was solid evidence of it. In fact, in Polanski's case, it was undeniable. And they still defended him. They still worked with him. They still said, it's not rape. That's what Whoopi Goldberg said. Sodomized a 13-year-old girl. Drugged her and sodomized her. Or got her drunk and sodomized her. That's one of the most horrific rapes you can imagine. 13-year-old girl. That's not rape, says Whoopi Goldberg. Meryl Streep called Harvey Weinstein God. Like God. But those are the people that are telling you about how you're a bigot. How the patriarchy and harming of women. I want to tell you a story that sums up the debate community, okay? In this vein. So, when you're judging, once you're the way debate works is this: because there's two teams that debate, you need at least one judge in the back of the room, and so each team is responsible to fill half the rounds of judging per team they have. It sounds confusing, but it makes sense when you think about it. Let's say you have one team. Clarion University would have one team debating. There's going to be 6 rounds. So you need to provide judging for 3 rounds because you need half as many judges as there are teams, because obviously 2 teams per judge, right? So if you have 4 teams, well, that's 3 rounds per team you need. So you need 12. So oftentimes your coaches will judge rounds sometimes, and then you'll hire judging. So I got hired when there would be a tournament at Clarion University. I would get hired to be a judge. Okay. At least I am talented at ranting. I will accept that. So I was asked to be a judge, and I was paid by Clarion University. Now, while the tournament's going on, you have what's called a tab room. And the tab room is where the tournament's hosted from. So you have to have a bracket. You determine. It's actually complicated. It's interesting if you're interested in like computer science and stuff. There's computer algorithms that set up who debates who. Because after so many rounds, depending on the tournament, you want the top teams debating the top teams and the bottom teams debating the bottom teams. But you have to be affirmative. You have to be negative. You can't debate the same team twice. So it's very complicated. You have a tab room, and then they collect all the ballots, and they record who won and lost and put it into this algorithm in the computer. Anyways, if you have a round off from judging, sometimes you hang out in the tab room, and there'll be, depending on the tournament, a bunch of people from the debate community that are hanging out in the tab room. Now, I won't mention any names, but there were a bunch of people that were prolific members of the debate team organization or debate community as I knew it. I didn't know everyone. I kind of stayed on the East Coast most of the time. And because I wasn't one of the best, like top tier national debaters, I didn't really get to know, like imagine if you're into chess, but you're only playing kind of like regional tournaments. You might not know all the national players. So these were the people I knew kind of regionally that were really good or really high positions, coaches, judges, things like that. So me and my wife were in the tab room. And I was told that there was a tournament coming up that was teaching women mixed martial arts. This is a debate tournament, But at that tournament, you could sign up for mixed martial arts classes to learn how to defend yourself against sexual predators in the debate community. And I made a stereotypical joke where I said, oh yeah, debaters, they're all a bunch of nerds, right? Like, it's a debate. There's a bunch of nerds. You know, they're all playing Dungeons and Dragons on their time off. And I was told by several people, oh, no. Sexual assault's prolific in the debate community. I said, what? Oh yeah. Now, that could be true because I just had my own little group in the debate. I hung out with Clarion. It wasn't prolific in our community. It wasn't prolific with the people I were friends with, that, as far as I knew. So this was news to me. I was like, really? Yeah. And I was like, well, yeah, maybe you could hear things, but I don't know if that's true. And they said, no. We know. Now, this is a room full of people, mind you. They said, we know of at least one prominent director of one of the bigger debate programs who has sexually assaulted or raped, I can't remember which word they used, several of his students. And I said, you don't know, you just maybe have heard that. Right? Oh no, we know. We know it's a fact. And I don't know if they heard me because I had to leave the room. But what would you say to that? Oh, they did hear me. I remember their response. I said, why haven't you called the police? And they responded, because this is a really powerful person. And it could jeopardize your career. That's the debate community in a nutshell. That's the community that's more moral than you. They know it's true. They know. They know of these allegations. They remain silent. Why? Their career, their pocketbook's more important than a girl who was raped. That's why. Now keep in mind, I asked them specifically, I said, you don't have proof, you just heard. Oh no, we know. I live paycheck to paycheck. I made $50,000 a year last year, and that's because I averaged working like 80 hours a week. That's how little money I make. If it cost me my career and possibly cost me my house because I knew of a girl that got raped, I would still defend that girl and do what I could to bring justice to her. But the people that tell me that have more than I have, that have far more money than I have, that are living far more comfortably, that claim to be the people that are the moral, virtuous defenders of women, that have embraced the Me Too movement, they can't risk their pocketbook when it comes to getting justice for a rape victim. They can't do it. A room full of people all in agreement. And if they knew, and it really was a prominent story with a prominent member, then many other people in the debate community knew. And they didn't say a word. So spare me your faux moral superiority. When I have people criticizing me on Facebook saying they're ashamed I was a member of that community because of my political beliefs, I'm ashamed I was a member of that community because of their beliefs. Because of that. And that's the truth. That's the truth of of so many of these groups on the extreme left and what they really believe. Go look at the video of Portland, right? Did you see the grandma that's asking them to stop burning stuff down as Antifa throws paint on her and attacks her? Did you see that? Did you see the street preacher that they beat up? Did you see David Dorn that they killed? Did you see the Ronald McDonald House charities that they broke into in Chicago the other day? It's all okay. They're better than you. They're better than you. They could be racist. They could be violent. They could claim that they care about women while they cover up the most heinous crimes that go against women. All of it. And they do so smugly and arrogantly, thinking all the while they're better than you. They're not better than you. People in the debate community are smart. Many of them are smart. Very smart. I debated people that had perfect SAT scores. In fact, I probably at the National Debate Tournament had the lowest SAT score of anyone that qualified for that tournament, at least near the bottom, if not the lowest. They're very smart. They're highly educated. That doesn't mean that you're wise. Some of the wisest people I've ever met didn't graduate high school. Yet they'll sneer at you. Oh, Trump supporters are lesser educated. Look at their hypocrisy. Imagine saying that. Okay, well, the majority of blacks vote for Democrats, and I always hear about how blacks don't have as many education opportunity as whites. How would it look if I came out and saying, well, blacks vote Democrat because they're, on average, less educated? How's that sound? You think that'd fly? No, it could be true, and I don't mind them talking about the education, but the way they sneer about it, it's laughable. The debate community, you know what your job is? You're a game. That's what you are. You're a game. You're a game that claims to be everything you're not. You're intolerant. You're racist. You're bigoted. You protect sexual predators when you think that it would jeopardize your career to not do something about it. That's who you are. You attack people based on their skin color. You attack people based on their race. You don't allow arguments that don't mirror your orthodoxy. That's who you are. All the while you brag, we're all about diversity. We're all about inclusion. Oh, we want an exchange of ideas. But at the end of the day, you know what you are? You're a game. And that's fine. Games are important. In fact, I think one of the things that's wrong with our society today is everything's been politicized. I can't even turn on a football game without politics being thrown into it. I can't turn on late night comedy without it being all about politics. So I actually respect the idea that you're a game, but you're just a game. That's what you are. And it could give people skills, and it could be important. But it also could be detrimental, which I believe it is. And you're dying. Your community is dying because people are waking up to how ridiculous it is, how ridiculous your insular community is. And all the while that you claim that as a coach or a judge of this game, that you have some moral superiority and you're somehow better than other people, you're not. You hold contempt for people that are actually doing things that make this country go, that allow you to be a coach of a game that is making huge amounts of money. The farmer, the truck driver, the people in flyover country that you insult all the time, the people that you're talking about their privilege, as you make six-figure incomes or as you make tons of money, I have no idea how much all of them make. You live far more comfortably than the people I know that live in my little town that are working their finger to the bone 40, 50 hours a week, yet you lecture them about their privilege. It's cool. You'll say your privilege too, but we know that you're just saying your privilege because you want to get those sweet, sweet virtue signaling points that you could get. So please spare me your indignity and spare me your faux moral superiority as you claim that you're better than people and you're ashamed of people for their political beliefs. You think that Cannon Hinton, a 5-year-old that was executed by a black man, he still had white privilege. Yeah, he got executed, but hey, at least his final thoughts as a bullet went through his brain could have been, at least I'm white, right? At least he had that privilege. It's a disgusting mentality. It's disgusting behavior. And you ought to be ashamed of yourself if you had any self-reflection. And then on top of all that, some of you choose to make personal attacks, even when people like me have been nothing but polite to you. Even when I faced every outrage, even when I had to deny who I am and say that, yes, the way I was born is somehow I'm born with some sort of original sin because of the pigmentation of my skin or because of the gender I was born with. Even then, I kept a smile on my face and I was polite to you. In fact, I'd go so far as to say, I think a lot of people would tell you objectively that I was one of the nicest people in the community. I was fun-loving. I didn't freak out when I lost. I might get heated, but I tried to be friends with a lot of people, even if they disagreed with me. But you feel the need to say that you're ashamed of me and make personal attacks and mock the fact that I don't get many views in my videos. It's utterly disgusting. But I won't share the same reciprocal nature with you. I hope all of you well in your lives. I hope that you start to think about how the positions you take are bigoted and how your intolerance is unacceptable. But I wish you success. I hope that your families do great. I hope that you do great. I hope you live a long and filling life. I'm not going to stoop to the level that you've stooped to. I'm not going to say that you have some sort of privilege, therefore, well, bad things happen to you. At least you were privileged if you get murdered. I won't say that. I won't do those type of things. But you go on thinking you're superior. You go on when you hear allegations or you think you have proof of sexual assault. You go on and claim that you're morally superior, but you don't want to risk your career by commenting on it. You go ahead. You go ahead pushing an activity that the majority of the world, anytime they see 5 minutes of it, realize is totally worthless. You go ahead and kick good people out of the community because they would say things like, look, that's fine. If you want to do this craziness at the highest level of debates, that's fine. You could expect it. But when we have people that are new coming into debate, can we at least limit the argument so that we're not screaming at them, calling them racist? And you say those people that said that are actually racist themselves. You go ahead. You keep saying that. You keep doing it. It makes you feel good. That's great. And I hope, I'm like you, I don't want to censor your viewpoint. I want you to speak loud and clear. I want you to have as big a platform as possible. Heck, any one of you, I welcome you coming on my channel. Would totally welcome it. Please come on my channel. The more you talk, the better that the mainstream Americans could see what you really believe. So I welcome it. I totally do. And so for any of you out there that are in the debate community that want to disagree with what I said, that's perfectly fine. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you could talk to me. But I welcome you coming on. I'm not like you. I actually encourage diversity of thoughts and ideas. I don't want just people that share my political ideology to be the only people that have a voice. That's not what I want. So I just wanted to say that, today, I hope someone in the debate community sees it. They probably won't. That's fine. But I'll make sure it gets on Facebook so those that were mocking me or, that were saying that type of stuff have access to be able to respond to this if they want. But for the rest of you that aren't in the debate community, I just wanted you to know that that's the type of stuff that goes on. And it will get worse before it gets better. It will. The identity politics, the idea, we can already see it. We literally saw with the Covington situation, prominent members of our society, of our institutions, powerful people, defend adult, homophobic, black racist for attacking children because they perceived the children as Trump supporters. So it was okay. They defended him. They defended a Native American man who said, yes, these black racists were telling these kids harsh truths. That's who they defended. That's what they did. And even after they found out the kids were getting death threats, they still doubled down. They tried to bring up irrelevant stories to justify their original attacks. Did you see that kids painted themselves black 5 years before these kids were at the school at a basketball game, at a blackout game? And what does that have to do with these kids 5 years later? An adult black racist yelling at them. There's always white privilege, I'm told. If there's so much white privilege, why in these inner city communities that are being burned down in riots, why are people putting up signs on their property that says black-owned business, black-owned home? If there's white privilege, even if you were a minority, wouldn't you be saying white-owned? I have privilege. Huh. It's almost like we know, despite what the ivory tower tells us, we know that it's not as simple as just there's white privilege. It's not that simple, is it? In that particular situation, you know that you have a better chance of being minority. You're privileged in a sense being a minority because if you're white and you own that business, it'll be burned to the ground. So all the people could ignore and deflect and obfuscate all they want in their ivory tower. Oh, no, that's not what's really happening. If you're on the ground, you see it. And by the way, I've seen it. These people, they're all for the riot. What riots? It's all peaceful. And if it was riots, it's because the police interacted. And we need to defund the police. It's easy to say that. It's easy when it's not your community. You live in the suburbs. You don't live in the inner city. Hey, if a bunch of white people want to go into the inner city and burn down the inner city in the name of Black Lives Matter, so be it. That's good for you. Now, if they come to your community, it's different. Then it would be different. Then you would call the police, right? Privileged people like Oprah, privileged people like the people in the debate community, some of the most privileged people you'll ever see, thanks to their economic success. And a lot of it's not privilege. A lot of it might have been because they worked hard and abided the rules of our system to obtain the wealth that they got. But still, in the context of what they are afforded now, we would colloquially call it privilege in the sense that the left calls it. So people like Oprah, LeBron James, people in the debate community lecturing you on your privilege. That's what they do. You're just a skin color to them. If you're white, you have original sin, you have privilege, you need to make amends for that. If you're black, you're an infant that they're no better than you and they'll take care of you and you have no personal agency. They're there, everything will be all right, you need special treatment. Racism on all sides. I thought that we had this argument. I thought that this argument was over, that we judge people based on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case. And I know that the counter argument to this will be like, oh, so we can't look at data and see if one group is historically doing better than other groups. Yes, we can. The problem is the way in which you do it. You don't talk about privilege of any other groups, just the cultural Marxist and intersectional groups that you want to defend. So you'll talk about the privilege of men, you'll talk about the privilege of whites, but you won't talk about black privilege, you won't talk about female privilege. If we look at economic markers as your token for who is privileged and who is not, we could see that whites fall about 13th as far as the list of who has the highest economic average in this country. Filipino Americans, Korean Americans, Hmong Americans, Cambodian Americans, Indian Americans, all of them are doing better than white Americans. Yet we don't hear about their privilege. Why is that? Why don't you talk about that? Why are you only focused on one type of privilege? Because you're racist. That's why. Because you're not arguing in good faith. Because you really just want to say this group is inherently bad. It's the same people that say, oh, the only reason Trump got elected was because they're afraid of the brown horde, like Rick Wilson said, supposedly a Republican on CNN. It's that same sort of argument. You're a racist. You want to denounce people as racist to cover up for your racism. That's what this is. Penguin says I'm misrepresenting what white privilege is. Explain to me what white privilege is, Penguin. White privilege is the idea that as a white person, you have a system inherently that benefits you. So because the majority of the country is white, I therefore have privilege by being white. That is it's true and false at the same time. It's true in the sense that that's true. There are a lot of incidents where being white is beneficial. For example, if looking like the people in your community is important to you, most communities in this country, because there's a majority of whites, would offer some sort of white privilege. However, that's only true in select situations. If we look at other select situations, we can see that there's privilege of other races. For example, if I live in inner city Harlem, then the majority of people that live there are going to look like me. Hence, there would be a black privilege there. Now, if we're talking just about economic success, because they want to conflate what this privilege is, we can see that white people list about 13th of the economic success on average of people in this country, which would mean we should be talking about Asian privilege and Filipino privilege instead of white privilege. But you'll say, no, that's not what it is. There's always something about being white. So then you might reference law enforcement. Heck, I'll even concede the argument. We could say that there are reasons that if interactions with law enforcement, that you're more privileged to be a white person than you would to be a person of color. Now, there are reasons for this. It could be, for example, that in a certain community, that it's not so much a race thing, it's more of a where do you live thing, because the majority of violent interactions with the police occur in inner city communities where the majority of violent crime occurs, which isn't a mistake. And so it just so happens that those communities happen to be majoritarily black. So is it possible that there are more violent interactions with police because there's more violence occurring in those communities? I would say it's likely. But even still then, let me concede your argument on top of that when we're talking about parking tickets and speeding tickets, you're privileged to be white versus being black. Okay, well, it still doesn't answer the fact that if it's just white privilege, then why are other people of color, such as Asian Americans, not stopped as high as clip as black Americans? Now, you might say, well, that's because they're not as easily visible. Okay, fine. Let's concede the whole argument then. For the sake of argument, we'll say you're right. When it comes to parking tickets and speeding tickets, when it comes to those interactions with law enforcement, sure, you're privileged to be white. Fair enough, great. Now, when it comes to academia, you privileged to be white or black. Oh, wait, that's a person of color you're privileged to be. In fact, you could have a much lower SAT score and get into Ivy League schools as a black person, so you're more privileged to be black in that situation. When it comes to debate, were you more privileged to be white or black? In other words, which one could use their identity to help win debate rounds? Oh, that was black, but again, we only talk about white privilege. When it comes to all sorts of situations, there are organizations that talk specifically about advocacy for people of color and things like that. That is a form of privilege. I knew a person, I heard a story, this person's name went to Clarion University. Their name was Jerome. They happened to be a white person. Their grades were failing. So they got a call from an organization in Clarion saying, hey, we'd like to tutor you. We'd like to help out because we see that you're not doing so well. So he showed up to the tutoring session. They said, oh, you're white. We assumed you were black. No, we're just here, an organization to help black students. Was that white privilege? Penguin says, any other groups are better off because they were originally more wealthy when immigrating. If you can brought here against your will and have nothing, slavery, then your group is more likely to be worse off, and we need to recognize that. That's absolutely fundamentally untrue. Prove to me that everyone that came here was originally wealthy. You have no evidence to back that up. And even if we would concede that argument, what does that have to do with the idea that you somehow have privilege today if you happen to be a certain pigmentation color? So, for example, let's say that that's right, that the black community hasn't had a leg up because they were victims of slavery and stuff. We could also look at the same of the Jewish community. They went through the Holocaust. It doesn't seem to be affecting them so negatively. But even still, let's say, fine, let's go with that and say, well, the reason that blacks are economically not doing well is because all of this historic oppression. Fair enough. So let's say two people were born today. One of those people's name's Bob, he's black. One of them's name's Will, he's white. Bob's family went through Jim Crow and went through slavery, and therefore they never had the opportunity to have economic viability. Terrible. He was born to a single mother today that made $30,000 a year. Now here's Will. Will's family was white. They didn't go through Jim Crow or slavery. They didn't go through any of that. Instead, Will's family worked at a mill in a small town, and that mill closed in the 70s, and ever since then, his family's been struggling mightily with substance abuse, with other things. Will was born to a single mother who made $30,000 a year. Explain to me why Will's more privileged than Bob. Well, historically, his family could have made money, and instead of focusing on the groups, we might be looking at the individuals and saying, the problem is poverty. How can we help people in poverty? But instead, we make it racially. And so Oprah would say, no matter what, Will, the white kid, even if he's born in crippling poverty, he still has that white privilege. How does he benefit from that white privilege? Your interpretation of what white privilege is, on average, okay, exactly. But that's just talking about, okay, then wealthy white people, you might say, have ill-gotten wealth. Fair enough. What does that have to do with poor white people? Why is it privilege based on race then? What the privilege is privilege based on the success of your ancestors. That's the real privilege. You might more likely be in this country, have more likely an ability to have wealthy ancestors, thereby affording you some privilege. But by no means does being white afford you that privilege automatically. So what does Oprah mean when she says, you still got your whiteness? Where can I cash in my white privilege? What is it that I could use it for? If I was born to an impoverished family and a black person was born to a wealthy family, will my kid that's supposed to be born in January, will they be more privileged than LeBron James' kid? So, and furthermore, all of these people fine, you have white privilege, right? Fine. I don't believe I have white privilege. I believe that I'm someone who's in an economic situation predominantly because of the decisions I made in life. I decided to get drunk a lot in college. I decided to not use my master's degree to make more money because I've got complacent. That's what I did. That's on me, right? That's what I decided. I don't think that I have white privilege that's some card that gave me undue wealth that I wasn't deserving of. But maybe you do. Then give your wealth away. Give it away. If you commit a crime out of ignorance, it might still be a crime, but that's less egregious than knowingly committing a crime. And so I don't believe that I have white privilege. Or rather, I believe I do have white privilege, but there's so many privileges of so many different races that it becomes irrelevant and horrible to talk about, and it's used to justify racism. That's my real belief on the position. So as such, I don't feel guilty having the stuff that I have. I don't feel guilty at all. What limited stuff I have, which isn't a lot, I've worked for. And sure, I've had help from friends and family in the community and things like that, but I don't think my skin color had anything to do with it. However, if you do, if you think your gains are ill-gotten because of your skin color, then give it up. Now, at the end of the day, let's say I'm wrong and there is this white privilege. Well, okay, I didn't believe in it, so even though it's bad, I didn't believe in it. That's not as immoral as you, who believed in the white privilege and said, yes, I got all this stuff because I'm white. Oh, but I won't give it up. No. I stole this. My ancestors stole all this from you, and so that's how I got it all. But I'm not going to give it back to you. Now, who's more moral? The debate community made up of a bunch of white liberal people. They ain't giving up their wealth. They're all living in way fancier houses than me, driving way better cars than me, flying around the country, going to resorts and stuff for debate gatherings. So while they lecture me on white privilege and how, oh, we're ashamed also that we have white privilege, they ain't doing anything of substance to give up that privilege, are they? And every time you bring this up to someone, every single time, this is what they'll say. And you'll probably say the same thing when you'll say, oh, I do that. As a white person, I do give up my stuff to people of color. I do that. Then why is there still a problem? Every single liberal I talk to apparently is living in homeless shelters, giving all of their possessions to people of color. When you talk to them, that's what they say. They're all the most philanthropic people you've ever met. Even when you personally know them and you know that it's not the truth, like people I've dealt with in Clarion, they'll still try to lie to me and virtue signal online. I do give all of my wealth up to black people. You're full of it. I'm right. Is there Chinese privilege in China? African privilege in Africa? No. It's clear that it's selective. This is what it is. It has to do with cultural Marxism. It has to do with these people are ashamed and hate average people in this country. And by the way, even if you only care about, let's say that you are racist and you only care about the black community and you don't care that you think white people need to be brought down a peg. Fine, great, whatever, fine. That's racism, but whatever. Let's say that that's what you believe. The very policies that you're advocating for, the very focus on these race-based policies and race-based political philosophy actually is detrimental to the black community as well. For example, defund the police. Okay, as a result of just paying lip service for that and demoralizing the police, murders are up around 20% in the country this year. When we get rid of the police, who do you think is going to be the first community that feels the effects of that? Inner city communities with a lot of violence that are predominantly black. We want open borders. Okay, who does that predominantly affect? Well, it's usually low-skilled laborers for people that are coming in as illegal immigrants that predominantly affect inner-city low-skilled labor, which means they're directly competing with majoritarily black people for labor. All of these things we're told, oh, you have to believe in this white privilege narrative and therefore engage in policies that the people that espouse that narrative believe. Almost every single one of those policies end up harming the black community. So that's it. Yeah, and right, and then there are people saying like the idea that like it wasn't every white person that achieved from this ancestor. Do I have less of a privilege if my ancestors fought for the North, and maybe my great 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 grandma had to raise all of her kids by herself because her husband went and fought to free the slaves and was killed? Do I still have the privilege? And so economically for generations, my family struggled because of that point in time. Is that still privilege? Why is it that we have to make it about skin color? Why does this happen all the time? Feminists do the same thing. What you're really trying to say is people that didn't have ancestors that benefited economically are in an unprivileged situation. Okay. Then you could say, in addition to that, we think that has affected black people more because of the racist laws and slavery and Jim Crow and things like that. Okay. But that doesn't guarantee, like Oprah says, that all white people have privilege. It doesn't. The reason they say all white people have privilege is because they're racist. They think that someone like Oprah is less privileged than the homeless white person. That's what they think. So, all right. Well, I'm going to head out. I got to do some dishes and stuff like that. But yeah, thanks so much for listening. I know it's not the most interesting thing in the world to listen to about a community that maybe you weren't a part of, which is the debate community. But I had refrained from speaking much on it. I'd given little snippets of what was going on in the debate community. But I just thought, seeing as how at least one person commented to me from the debate community, and one person liked that comment saying that they were ashamed of me and they were glad that I didn't get many views. I thought that it was worth talking about today. So, I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope that it came across that I did not give one person's specific name. And despite what I said about that community, and I think that community is bad, it is a net loss. I did say some things that I liked about the community. I did mention that I made personal relationships there with people that largely I politically disagree with, but that I wouldn't change those relationships for the world. And that I really like and respect those people, even if they despise my politics. And I still truly believe even the most repugnant people, even those people that said things like, we know of a rape, but we're not going to report it because we don't want to jeopardize our career. Even those people, even in that most heinous of situations, I still wish those people well. And I'm not on here making personal attacks saying that I hope that their projects or their career doesn't go well, unlike the courtesy some of them give me. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't. You can follow me on YouTube. It's almost Normal America or Normal America with Rob Noor on every platform. So you can find me on YouTube with Normal America with Rob Noor. On D Live, it's just Normal America. You can find me on Twitch. I think it's Normal America with Rob Noor. I'm also on Periscope and Facebook, so you can find me on those platforms as well. I will be branching out. I started a BitChute account, and I started a Locals account, so I'll be branching out to that stuff. So I really just really appreciate anyone who looks with me. Penguin, you would like to talk on Discord and have an honest conversation. I would be happy to have an honest conversation with you on Discord. Unfortunately, I have 2 jobs, so it's hard for me to have a time when I could do it. But I'll tell you what, Penguin, let me do something for you. I'm going to throw my email on here. It's rob.noor@gmail.com. Please feel free to email me, and I'll get your Discord information or whatever, and we can try to have a conversation on or off camera at some point. I can't make any promises it'll be soon because I'm working 2 jobs right now, and I got a lot of stuff going on. I'm going to be a father for the first time, so I'm excited. But yeah, I would love to have an honest conversation. I welcome people that disagree. I really do. So, all right. Thanks so much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this. Please like and subscribe. Check out my other channels. All donations are appreciated. But if you don't donate, that's fine. I wouldn't donate to me either because I'm broke. So, so it's perfectly fine. But thanks so much, everyone. And as always, have a good one.